The key felt foreign in Alden Reese's hand as he stood before his own front door. 9 weeks of classified work in secure facilities had left him craving nothing more than his own bed, his son's laugh, and Linnea's familiar presence. The Virginia contract had been lucrative but exhausting 12-hour days in windowless rooms, debugging security protocols that kept America's infrastructure safe from cyber attacks. He'd counted down the days until he could come home to his family. But the brass key that had turned this lock for 8 years now refused to budge. He pulled it out, examined it under the new porch light when had they installed that, and tried again. Nothing. The metal scraped against metal with a sound that made his jaw clench. The key was definitely his. He'd carried it in his wallet during the entire deployment, along with Declan's school photo and their last family picture. What the hell? He stepped back, scanning his house like he was seeing it for the first time. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. The porch railing had been painted a different shade of green. The welcome mat was wrong, some generic brown thing, instead of the Seattle Seahawks mat Declan had picked out last Christmas. Even the house numbers looked different, though he couldn't put his finger on why. The security camera mounted above the door was definitely new. Black and modern, its red recording light blinked at him like an accusing eye. The welcome mat was different too, some generic brown thing instead of the Seattle Seahawks mat Declan had picked out last Christmas. Alden walked around to the garage. Empty. His Ford F-150 was gone. His phone showed 3 bars. He dialed Linnea's number. Straight to voicemail. Declan's phone did the same thing. The silence pressed against his eardrums. No music from Declan's room. No television chatter. No sign that anyone lived here at all. He tried the spare key hidden under the fake rock by the garden hose. That lock wouldn't turn either. Alden's training kicked in. Assess the situation. Gather information. React with precision, not emotion. He called the Spokane Police Department. This is Alden Reese. I need a welfare check at 2247 North Maple Street. I've been deployed for work and I can't reach my wife or son. My key won't work in my own front door. The dispatcher took his information with professional calm. We'll have an officer there within 20 minutes, sir. Alden sat on his porch steps and waited. The October air bit through his jacket, but the cold felt distant. Everything felt distant. This couldn't be real. Linnea wouldn't just disappear. She knew his contract was ending. They talked about it briefly, tensely before he left. Officer Martinez arrived in a squad car, followed by Officer Webb in a second vehicle. Martinez was young, probably early 30s, with the careful posture of someone who'd seen too much domestic drama. His uniform was crisp, his equipment meticulously arranged. Webb looked like he'd been doing this for decades. Graying temples, steady eyes, the kind of cop who'd learned to read situations before they exploded. Mr. Reese? I'm Officer Martinez. Can you show me some identification? Alden handed over his driver's license and military ID. Martinez studied them both, comparing the photo to Alden's face with professional thoroughness. Address matches, Martinez said to Webb. Mr. Reese, you said your key doesn't work. Not for 9 weeks, then I come home to this. Alden gestured at the unfamiliar camera, the wrong porch light, the general sense that strangers had been living in his space. My truck's missing from the garage. Can't reach my family on their phones. Martinez walked to the front door, tried the handle. Locked tight. He knocked firmly, the sound echoing in the quiet evening air. Spokane Police. Welfare check. No response. He knocked harder, called out louder. Spokane Police. We need to check on the residents. A sound came from inside, barely audible, like something heavy shifting against furniture. There's someone in there, Webb said. His hand moved instinctively toward his radio. He tried the door handle again, rattled it slightly. Still locked. I'm going to walk the perimeter, Martinez said. See if there's another way to make contact. Alden watched him disappear around the side of the house, peering through windows with his flashlight. The beam reflected off glass, illuminating empty rooms that looked somehow wrong. His living room furniture was in different positions. The television was gone entirely. When Martinez came back, his expression had changed from routine to concerned. Mr. Reese, I need you to stay out here while we check inside. We're going to make entry. What did you see? To stay here, sir. We'll explain everything once we know what's going on. Webb worked on the lock with practiced efficiency, using tools from a small kit he kept in his patrol car. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open with a groan that suggested the hinges needed oil. Both officers disappeared inside, their voices immediately becoming muffled and urgent. Alden heard them moving through his house, calling out room by room. Their footsteps were heavy on the hardwood floors he'd installed 3 years ago. He caught fragments of radio chatter, something about a minor, something about condition unknown. Martinez emerged 5 minutes later. His face was grim, and he was already reaching for his radio. "Sir, you shouldn't go in. Your son, he's here, but something's wrong." Alden's stomach dropped like he'd been sucker punched. "What do you mean something's wrong? Is he hurt? He's alive, but he's not responding much. There's no sign of your wife. The house is in bad condition. How long did you say you were gone?" 9 weeks. "What do you mean bad condition?" Webb appeared in the doorway, speaking quietly into his radio. When he finished, he looked at Alden with the expression of a man who'd seen too much human misery. "Kid's in shock, looks like. House is trashed inside. When's the last time you spoke to your family?" 2 weeks ago. Maybe 3. The project required limited contact for security reasons. Alden pushed past Webb, his parental instincts overriding everything else. The smell hit him first. Garbage, stale food, something sour and neglected that made his eyes water. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it, but not the kind of destruction that came from burglary or violence. This was neglect, systematic abandonment. Furniture was overturned, but not broken. Garbage bags had been split open, their contents scattered across the floor, empty cereal boxes, moldy bread, takeout containers that had been picked clean weeks ago. Clothes were everywhere, but not ransacked, just left, as if someone had stopped caring about anything. Declan sat on the couch in the middle of the chaos. Alden's 15-year-old son looked smaller than he remembered, thinner. His dark hair hung in greasy strands that hadn't seen shampoo in weeks. He wore the same Nirvana t-shirt he'd had on during their last video call, but now it was stained and hung loose on his shrinking frame. "Declan." Alden knelt in front of the couch, his voice careful. "Son, what happened here?" Declan's eyes focused on him slowly, like someone waking from a deep sleep. The recognition took several seconds, as if his brain was having trouble processing that his father was real. "Dad." The word came out cracked and uncertain. "Yeah, it's me. I'm here now. Where's your mom?" Declan's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked around the destroyed room like he was seeing it for the first time, confusion replacing recognition in his eyes. "Mr. Reese," Martinez said from behind him, "we need you to step outside. This is my house. That's my son." "Sir, I understand, but there's a situation here. We need to call Child Protective Services and get the boy checked out medically. Until we know what happened." "I know what happened. I was working. I had a contract with Homeland Security. I can show you the paperwork." Webb's radio crackled with static. He stepped away to answer it, spoke in low, urgent tones. When he came back, his expression had shifted entirely. "Mr. Reese, we need to talk outside." Now, on the porch, Webb handed him a manila envelope. This was at the station, filed 2 weeks ago. Alden opened it with numb fingers. Legal documents. A temporary protection order. His name listed as the respondent. The petitioner, Linnea Hartley Reese. The allegations made his vision blur around the edges. Emotional abuse. Psychological intimidation. Threats of violence. A claim that he suffered from military PTSD and had become increasingly unstable and dangerous. "This is impossible," he said. "I was in a secure facility in Virginia. I have deployment orders. I have witnesses. Mr. Reese, according to this order, you're not supposed to be within 500 feet of this residence or have contact with your wife or son." My wife filed a false police report. Martinez took the papers back. "That's for the courts to decide. Right now, we need to remove you from the premises while we figure out what's going on with your son. You can't be serious. Dead serious. If you violate this protection order, we'll arrest you." Alden looked through the open doorway at Declan, still sitting motionless on the couch. His son needed him. The house was destroyed. His wife was missing, and he was being ordered to leave. "When am I supposed to go?" "That's not our problem, sir. But you need to leave. Now." Alden walked to his rental car, his hands shaking with rage he couldn't express. Behind him, he heard Webb calling for an ambulance and social services. The motel room on Sprague Avenue smelled like disinfectant and despair. Alden sat on the bed with his laptop, pulling up files he'd stored in encrypted folders. His deployment orders, his travel records, his security clearance documentation. Every piece of paper proved he'd been 2,000 miles away when Linnea claimed he was threatening her and Declan. His phone rang. Unknown local number. Mr. Reese? This is Janet Kowalski with Child Protective Services. I'm calling about your son, Declan. How is he? He's at Sacred Heart Hospital for evaluation. He's dehydrated and malnourished, but physically he's going to be okay. The house. Mr. Reese, when was the last time you were home? 9 weeks ago. I can prove it. Your son told our social worker that his mother left him alone 3 weeks ago. Said she'd be back in a few days. He's been living on whatever food was in the house. Alden closed his eyes. Where's my wife? We don't know. We're trying to locate her. In the meantime, because of the protection order, Declan will remain in state custody until this gets sorted out. The protection order is fraudulent. I can prove I was out of state. That's something you'll need to take up with the court, Mr. Reese. I'm sorry. The line went dead. Alden called his lawyer, a family attorney who'd handled his divorce papers and will years ago. Thomas Pike answered on the third ring. Alden, wasn't expecting to hear from you. I need help, Tom. My wife filed a false protection order, and CPS has my son. He explained the situation in clipped, precise sentences. Tom listened without interrupting. Jesus Christ, Alden. This is bad, but if you can prove you were deployed, we can get this dismissed quickly. Can you be in my office first thing Monday morning? I'll be there. Don't contact your wife. Don't go near the house. Don't even drive down that street. If she's setting you up, you give her nothing to work with. Alden hung up and opened his laptop. Time to build a case. Time to fight back. But first, he needed to understand what had happened to his family while he was gone. The Pierce County Courthouse felt like enemy territory on a cold November morning. Alden sat beside Tom Pike in a wood-paneled courtroom that smelled of old paper and institutional coffee. His deployment files were spread across the defense table like evidence of his innocence: GPS logs, hotel receipts, security badge scans, even photographs time-stamped at the Virginia facility. Judge Patricia Hernandez was in her 50s, with silver hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades sorting truth from fiction in family court. She reviewed Alden's documentation with the thoroughness of a person who understood that false accusations could destroy lives as easily as real abuse. Mr. Pike, your client's documentation appears comprehensive, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. GPS data showing his location 2,000 miles away, travel receipts from his deployment, security log from a classified facility. When was Mr. Reese's last verified day at home? July 15th, Your Honor. He departed for his contract with the Department of Homeland Security the following morning. We have security footage from Spokane International Airport showing his departure and rental car record from Dulles Airport in Virginia showing his arrival. Judge Hernandez turned to the empty table where Linnea's attorney should have been sitting. The absence was telling. Even her court-appointed lawyer had apparently given up on defending the indefensible. I see the petitioner has failed to appear for this hearing. Has counsel made any contact with the court? The court clerk, a stern woman in her 60s, shook her head. No response to our notices, Your Honor. The public defender's office withdrew from representation yesterday, citing inability to contact their client. Very well. Judge Hernandez closed the file and looked directly at Alden. Mr. Reese, the evidence you've presented clearly demonstrates that you were not present in Washington state during the period covered by these allegations. The protection order appears to be based on fabricated information. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle in the courtroom. Given the evidence presented and the petitioner's failure to appear or provide any contradictory documentation, I'm dissolving the temporary protection order effective immediately. Mr. Reese, you're free to return to your home and resume contact with your minor child. Tom squeezed Alden's shoulder. We'll file for emergency custody this afternoon. With the evidence of abandonment and false accusations, you should have sole custody within a week. Outside the courthouse, Alden felt something close to relief for the first time since coming home. His phone rang immediately, the number he'd been waiting for. Mr. Reese? This is Janet Kowalski again from Child Protective Services. I heard about the court ruling. Your son has been asking for you constantly. How is he? Better. He's gained some weight, and our counselors say he's opening up more. He's been staying with a foster family, but he wants to come home. Are you ready for that? More than ready. Sacred Heart Hospital's pediatric ward was painted in cheerful colors that did nothing to mask the institutional smell of sanitizer and underlying sadness. Alden walked past rooms filled with sick children, their families keeping vigil in uncomfortable chairs. The sounds of medical equipment and muffled conversations created a backdrop of controlled crisis. Declan sat propped up in bed in room 314, and foreline his left arm, feeding him the nutrients his body had been craving for weeks. He looked up when Alden entered, and something that had been clenched tight in Alden's chest finally loosened. "Dad." The word came out like a prayer, filled with relief and disbelief. Alden hugged him carefully, aware of the medical equipment and his son's fragile condition. Declan felt smaller in his arms, but he was warm and alive and real. "I'm here, son. I'm not going anywhere. Ever again. I thought. Mom said you weren't coming back. She said you found another family and that the army job was just an excuse to leave us." The words hit Alden like physical blows. "That's not true. You know that's not true, right?" "I know now." Declan looked down at his hands, which were still too thin but no longer shaking. "But when you didn't call for so long, and she kept saying the security restrictions were real, Declan, I couldn't call whenever I wanted. I had to use monitored lines at specific times. I tried to reach you both, but your mom's phone kept going to voicemail because she threw it away. Got a new one with a different number. Said she didn't want you to be able to find us." Declan reached under his pillow and pulled out a small flash drive, handling it like it contained something dangerous. "I recorded some stuff while you were gone." Alden took the drive, noting how his son's hands trembled slightly as he handed it over. "What kind of stuff?" "Mom was bringing him here. Kellen, the guy from Elm Street, 2 blocks over. They were together. In your bed." Declan's voice got quieter, more shame-filled. "She said I should call him Dad." White-hot rage flashed through Alden's mind, but he kept his voice steady and controlled. His son needed strength, not anger. "What else happened?" "They were talking about you. About money. About selling your tools and your motorcycle. About the house." Declan met his eyes with an expression far too old for 16. "I hid in the attic and recorded them. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared, but I knew something was really wrong." Alden squeezed his son's hand. "You did exactly right. You protected yourself, and you documented the truth. That took courage. Mom said if I ever told anyone about Kellen, she'd say I was lying to protect you. That no one would believe me, because kids always lie to protect abusive parents. But I never abused anyone. I know, Dad. I always knew that. But she kept saying it over and over, like she was trying to make me believe it too." That evening, Alden sat in his cleaned living room with his laptop and Declan's flash drive. The audio was clear enough. Linnea's voice, then a man's, presumably Kellen Brody. "He's so stupid, he'll never figure it out," Linnea was saying. "Military guys are all the same. They think they're so smart, but they can't see what's right in front of them. What about the kid? Declan won't say anything. He's scared of me." Kellen laughed. "Maybe we should send him to live with his grandparents. Get him out of the way permanently. Or foster care. I could say Alden abused him too. Who's going to believe a 15-year-old over official police reports?" The recording continued for 27 minutes. By the end, Alden understood the full scope of what his wife had planned. The false protection order was just the beginning. She'd intended to claim the house, liquidate his assets, and disappear with Kellen while painting him as an unstable veteran who'd abandoned his family. She'd also talked about putting Declan in foster care if he became too much trouble. Alden saved the files to multiple secure locations. Then he called Tom Pike. "I need a new lawyer, Tom. Someone with criminal experience." "What are you talking about?" "My wife committed perjury. She filed false police reports. She conspired to defraud me and abandon our son. I want her prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Alden, are you sure?" Domestic cases like this. She left Declan alone for 3 weeks. He could have died. She's not getting a second chance to hurt him. Okay, I know someone. Morgan Sipes, former JAG attorney, handles complex family law and criminal defense. She's expensive, but she's ruthless. Set up a meeting. The strategy session in Morgan Sipes' downtown office felt like a military briefing, which suited Alden perfectly. Morgan had spread documents across her conference table: bank statements, phone records, property deeds, insurance claims, and Declan's flash drive recordings transcribed into neat typed pages. "This is more than just domestic fraud," Morgan said, tapping a highlighted section of the transcripts. "Your wife committed perjury when she filed that protection order. That's a Class C felony in Washington, punishable by up to 5 years in prison." Alden studied the evidence spread before them. What else? Child endangerment in the first degree. She abandoned a minor child for 3 weeks with no supervision, no food, and no way to contact emergency services. That's another felony. Morgan moved to a different set of documents. Then there's the insurance fraud. While you were deployed, she filed a claim with your homeowner's insurance, saying someone broke into your house and stole $8,000 worth of electronics and tools. But nothing was stolen. Exactly. She hid the items in Kellen's garage, filed the claim, collected the money, and then brought everything back. We found receipts for the items she claimed were stolen, along with photos showing them in Kellen's possession during the time she claimed they were missing. How did you find all this? Morgan smiled coldly. Private investigator, former Seattle PD detective who specializes in domestic fraud cases. She's very thorough. The investigator's report painted a picture of systematic deception. Linnea had opened bank accounts under false names, liquidated joint assets without Alden's knowledge, and even attempted to take out a loan against the house using forged documents. But here's the centerpiece, Morgan said, pulling up the surveillance footage on her laptop. The trap we set worked perfectly. The video showed Linnea and Kellen entering Alden's house 3 days after the fake email about his departure. They moved through the rooms with the confidence of people who believed they were completely safe. "Look at this conversation," Morgan said, adjusting the volume. Kellen's voice came through clearly. "You sure he's really gone?" "Positive. The phone company terminated his service for non-payment. He's probably living in his car somewhere, too broke to fight back." "What about the kid?" "Declan's handled. CPS has him, and even if Alden somehow gets him back, I'll just file more reports. Say the dad's gone crazy, the kid's traumatized, whatever. I've got friends at the school district who'll back me up." The conversation continued for 27 minutes, with Linnea and Kellen discussing their plans to liquidate everything valuable and disappear to Portland. But the most damaging part came near the end. "You really think this will work?" Kellen asked. "Military guys are all the same," Linnea replied. "They think following rules and being honorable means something. They can't imagine that someone would just lie and steal and walk away. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be long gone with his money. What if he fights back? How? He's got a restraining order against him based on my word. Who's going to believe him over official police reports? And even if he somehow proves his innocence, what's he going to do? Sue me? I'll be in Oregon with a new identity." Morgan paused the video. "She underestimated you. Completely. The prosecutor I work with is very interested in this case. Apparently, they've been seeing more domestic fraud schemes like this: spouses filing false protection orders to gain advantage in divorce proceedings or to cover up financial crimes." "What's the timeline?" "Warrants will be issued tomorrow. She'll be arrested at work, probably during the lunch hour when there are plenty of witnesses. Kellen will be picked up separately. He's got outstanding warrants in 3 counties, so he won't be going anywhere." Alden felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. "And then we destroy her in court. Systematically, legally, and permanently." The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Morgan filed for emergency sole custody based on child abandonment and endangerment. She submitted Alden's deployment records to the district attorney as evidence of perjury. She had the house legally transferred back to Alden's name and filed liens against any assets Linnea might try to liquidate. But the centerpiece was the trap. "She doesn't know the protection order was dissolved," Morgan explained. She thinks you're still banned from the house. We're going to let her think that a little longer. Alden created a fake email account using an old service he'd used years ago for spam. He sent Linnea a message from what appeared to be his phone company, notifying her that his service had been terminated due to non-payment and that he'd apparently left town without a forwarding address. Then he waited. The security cameras he'd legally installed after regaining control of his house captured everything in high definition. On October 30th, 3 days after the fake email, Linnea's Honda Civic pulled into his driveway. She wasn't alone. A tall man with the kind of beard that suggested unemployment climbed out of the passenger seat. Kellen Brody, according to the background check Morgan had run. They used a key to enter through the front door. Apparently, Linnea had only changed one lock, not both. The cameras followed them through the house as they began gathering items. Alden watched from his temporary apartment across town, recording everything on his laptop. "Look at this place," Kellen said, surveying the cleaned living room. "You didn't tell me he was loaded." "He's not, but there's stuff we can sell. His tools, the electronics, some guns in the bedroom safe. What about the bike in the garage? That Harley's worth 15 grand easy. We'll get it sold before he even knows we were here." They were loading Alden's welding equipment into Linnea's car when the conversation turned interesting. "I still can't believe the judge bought your abuse story," Kellen said. Linnea shrugged. "Judges are idiots. They see a crying woman with stories about a scary military husband. They don't ask questions. Besides, who's going to believe him? He was gone for 2 months. That looks suspicious already. What about the kid? Declan's handled. CPS has him, and even if Alden gets him back, I'll just file more reports. Say the dad's unstable, the kid's traumatized, whatever. I've got friends at the school who'll back me up." Kellen laughed. "You're evil. I love it. I'm practical." Alden never appreciated what he had. Now he'll lose it all. They argued about money next. Apparently, Kellen had debts and creditors, and Linnea's teacher's salary wouldn't cover his problems. The plan was to clean out everything valuable, sell it fast, and disappear to Portland before anyone could stop them. But the most damning conversation happened as they were leaving. "You sure the kid won't cause problems?" Kellen asked. "Declan's weak, just like his father. And if he does start talking, I'll say Alden coached him. Who's going to believe a teenager over official police reports? What if they ask too many questions? Then we'll say the kid's lying to protect his abusive father. Maybe suggest he needs psychological help. Foster care is probably better for him anyway. I never wanted children." Alden stopped the recording. He'd heard enough. The arrest happened exactly as Morgan had predicted. Alden wasn't there to witness it, but the local news covered the story that evening. High school counselor arrested on fraud charges. The footage showed Linnea being led out of Roosevelt High School in handcuffs while her colleagues and students watched from classroom windows. According to the news report, she'd been in the middle of a parent conference when the police arrived. The parents had apparently asked what was happening, and Linnea had tried to claim it was all a mistake, that her husband was trying to frame her because she discovered his abusive behavior. But the police had arrest warrants backed by extensive evidence. There was no explaining away the recorded confessions, the forged documents, or the clear timeline showing her perjury. Kellen Brody was arrested 3 hours later at a downtown sports bar, apparently unaware that his life was about to implode. He'd been drinking beer and playing pool, celebrating what he thought was his successful escape from his old life. Morgan called Alden that evening with updates. "She's being held on $75,000 bail," Morgan reported. The prosecutor argued that she's a flight risk, given her recorded statements about planning to disappear to Oregon with a new identity. What about Kellen? He's not going anywhere. Turns out he had outstanding warrants for writing bad checks in 3 counties, plus a probation violation from a previous fraud conviction. His bail was set at $100,000, which he obviously can't make. When's the arraignment? Tomorrow morning. She'll probably plead not guilty and try to blame everything on Kellen. Classic defense strategy: claim she was manipulated by a con artist. Will that work? Not with your son's testimony and her own recorded words. She's going to prison, Alden. The only question is for how long. The preliminary hearing was held on a gray November morning that matched Alden's mood perfectly. He sat in the gallery watching Linnea at the defendant's table, noting how she'd lost weight and changed her appearance. Her hair was shorter and darker, her clothes more conservative. She was trying to project the image of a reformed woman who'd learned from her mistakes. Her new attorney was James Wilson, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Wilson was competent but overworked, handling too many cases with too little time to prepare adequate defenses. Morgan dismantled Wilson's arguments with surgical precision. Your Honor, the defendant filed a protection order claiming abuse that occurred while her husband was 2,000 miles away on a classified government contract. She abandoned her 15-year-old son for 3 weeks with no food, no supervision, and no way to contact anyone for help. She committed insurance fraud by filing false claims while hiding the allegedly stolen items in her boyfriend's garage. Morgan paused to let that sink in before continuing. These aren't the desperate actions of a confused victim, Your Honor. These are the calculated moves of someone attempting to commit multiple felonies while destroying an innocent man's reputation and endangering a child's life. The judge bound all charges over for trial. Bail was revoked after the prosecutor argued that Linnea's recorded statements about fleeing to Oregon with a new identity made her an obvious flight risk. Outside the courthouse, Morgan walked Alden to his truck through a light November drizzle. She's going to try to plea bargain, Morgan predicted. Probably claim Kellen manipulated her, that she was scared, that she made mistakes but didn't mean to hurt anyone. What kind of sentence is she looking at if convicted on all charges? 6 to 8 years if we get convictions on everything. She'd probably serve 4 with good behavior and parole. Alden considered this. That's not enough. It's what the law allows for these charges. But there's something else to consider. What? Kellen's attorney reached out this morning. He wants to cooperate. Says he has information about other crimes your wife committed while you were deployed. Alden turned to face her fully. What kind of crimes? More insurance fraud, for one. Apparently, she also filed claims on your vehicles, saying they'd been vandalized. Collected another $3,000 from your auto insurance. She damaged my own vehicles and filed insurance claims. That's what it looks like. There might be more. If Kellen testifies against her, we can probably add more felony charges. Do it. I want every crime she committed prosecuted to the full extent of the law. There's one more thing, Morgan said, opening her briefcase. The private investigator found something interesting. She handed him a manila folder filled with bank statements and transaction records. Your wife opened 3 different accounts under variations of her maiden name. She's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for over 6 months, not just during your deployment. Alden scanned the documents. Small withdrawals. Never enough to trigger alerts, but they added up to nearly $15,000. She was planning this for a long time, since at least January, based on these records. The protection order, the abandonment, the fraud, none of it was impulsive. She spent months setting up this scheme. As winter settled over Spokane, Alden rebuilt his life with the same methodical precision he'd brought to military operations. Declan moved back home in December, physically recovered but still dealing with the psychological aftermath of abandonment. They established new routines: dinner together every night, homework at the kitchen table, weekend projects that slowly rebuilt their trust in each other. The house felt different now. Cleaner, quieter, more purposeful. Alden had thrown away everything that reminded him of Linnea: photos, clothes, books, furniture she'd chosen. They were building something new from the foundation up. Dr. Sarah Chun, the family therapist Declan was seeing twice a week, explained that recovery from parental abandonment took time. He's doing well, she told Alden during one of their monthly conferences, but expect setbacks. Trust takes time to rebuild, even between fathers and sons. What kind of setbacks? Anxiety when you're late coming home. Worry that you might leave again. Sometimes anger at you for things that weren't your fault. It's normal. How do I help him through it? Consistency. Reliability. Keep your promises, even small ones. Show him through actions that you're not going anywhere. One evening in December, as snow began to fall outside their rebuilt kitchen, Declan looked up from his physics homework. Dad, do you ever miss her? Alden considered the question carefully. This was important, maybe the most important conversation they'd had since reuniting. No, son. I don't. Not all. Not even the good times. The person I thought she was never existed. Those good times were built on lies I didn't recognize. I can't miss someone who was never real. Declan nodded slowly, processing this. She used to tell me you'd never come back, that you didn't really love us, that work was more important to you than family. What do you think now? I think she was wrong about everything. But sometimes I still hear her voice in my head, telling me things that aren't true. That's normal. Dr. Chan says those voices fade with time if we don't feed them. What do we not feed them? By living in truth instead of fear. By building something real together instead of worrying about things that aren't going to happen. Through the window, Alden watched snow accumulate on the street where they'd lived for 8 years. Soon it would be Christmas, their first Christmas without Linnea, but not their last Christmas as a family. His phone buzzed with a text from Morgan. Plea negotiations failed. She still claims innocence. Trial date set for March 15th. She's gambling everything on a jury. Alden deleted the message without responding. Let her gamble. He'd built his case on evidence, not hope. He was ready for the final battle. The Spokane County Superior Court was fuller than usual for a March morning. Domestic cases rarely drew crowds, but word had gotten out about the military contractor whose wife had tried to frame him for abuse while stealing his assets and abandoning their son. Alden sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, wearing his best suit and the expression of a man who'd already won. Beside him, Declan fidgeted with his tie. At 16 now, he'd gained weight and lost the hollow look that had haunted him during those first weeks after the rescue. You nervous? Alden asked quietly. A little, but I want to do this. You don't have to. The recordings are enough. No, Dad. I want her to hear it from me. Across the courtroom, Linnea sat with her new attorney, someone with better credentials than the overworked public defender who'd handled her preliminary hearing. She wore a conservative blue dress and minimal makeup, projecting the image of a reformed woman who'd made mistakes but deserved compassion. Alden felt nothing when he looked at her. No anger, no hurt, no lingering trace of whatever he'd once felt. She was simply an obstacle that needed to be removed from his life permanently. District Attorney Rebecca Walsh stood to deliver her opening statement. Walsh was in her 40s, with the kind of controlled intensity that came from prosecuting genuine criminals instead of small-time drug dealers and drunk drivers. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal on multiple levels. The defendant betrayed her husband, her son, and the legal system itself in a calculated attempt to steal money and property while destroying the reputation of an innocent man. She walked them through the timeline methodically. Alden's deployment to a classified government facility. Linnea's affair with Kellen Brody. The false protection order filed while Alden was 2,000 miles away. The abandonment of 15-year-old Declan for 3 weeks with no food or supervision. The defendant will claim she was confused, scared, manipulated by Mr. Brody. But the evidence will show that she was the architect of this scheme. She filed false police reports with specific, fabricated details. She forged text messages to support her claims. She abandoned her son, not because she was afraid, but because he was inconvenient to her plans. Walsh paused at the jury box. By the end of this trial, you'll understand that this wasn't a domestic dispute gone wrong. This was a deliberate, premeditated attempt to destroy a man's life and endanger a child's safety for money. The defense attorney, Jonathan Reeves, took a different approach. He painted Linnea as a victim of an emotionally distant husband and a manipulative boyfriend who'd led her astray. My client made mistakes, serious mistakes, but they came from a place of desperation and fear, not greed or malice. Mrs. Reese was married to a man who disappeared for months at a time, leaving her alone to raise their son and maintain their household. When she met Mr. Brody, she found someone who offered emotional support that had been missing from her marriage. Reese acknowledged the false protection order, but claimed it was filed because Linnea genuinely feared what Alden might do when he discovered her affair. Ladies and gentlemen, broken marriages make people do things they wouldn't normally do. My client's actions were wrong, but they came from human weakness, not criminal intent. Alden had to admit that Reeves was good. He made Linnea sound like a lonely housewife who'd made bad choices, not a calculating predator who tried to destroy her family for profit. But then the prosecution began presenting evidence. Walsh called Alden to the stand first. He testified in clear, factual sentences about his deployment, his security clearance, his complete absence from Washington State during the period when Linnea claimed he was threatening her. Mr. Reese, did you ever threaten your wife or son? No. Did you ever display violent behavior toward your family? Never. Have you ever been diagnosed with PTSD or any other psychological condition? No. I underwent psychological evaluations as part of my security clearance process. All results were normal. During cross-examination, Reeves tried to paint Alden as an emotionally distant father who'd abandoned his family for work. Mr. Reese, your son was alone for 3 weeks while his mother was missing. Where were you? I was completing a classified contract for the Department of Homeland Security. I had no knowledge that my wife had abandoned our son. But you had limited contact with your family during your deployment, correct? Contact was restricted due to the classified nature of the work. This was explained to my wife before I accepted the contract. Restricted how? No personal cell phone use. No social media. Email and video calls were limited to approved times and monitored for security purposes. Reeves pushed harder. So, your wife was essentially a single parent for 9 weeks. My wife was a full-time parent for 9 weeks, just as I had been during her business trips and training conferences. The difference is that I never abandoned our son. The prosecutor's case built methodically over 3 days. FBI cybercrime specialists testified about the forged text messages found on Linnea's phone. Bank investigators showed how she'd liquidated joint accounts and hidden the money in accounts under Kellen's name. Insurance fraud investigators explained the false burglary claim she'd filed while Alden was deployed, but the most damaging testimony came from Declan himself. He took the stand on the 4th day, wearing a suit that made him look older than his 16 years. His voice was steady as Walsh guided him through his testimony. Declan, can you tell the jury what happened after your father left for his work assignment in July? At first, everything was normal. Mom seemed happier. Actually, she was going out more, staying up late, talking on the phone a lot. When did you first see Kellen Brody at your house? Maybe 2 weeks after Dad left. Mom said he was helping with some repairs, but he started staying overnight. How did that make you feel? Uncomfortable. He acted like he lived there. He ate Dad's food, used Dad's tools, slept in Dad's bed. Did your mother explain why Mr. Brody was staying at your house? She said Dad wasn't coming back, that he'd found another family and the Army job was just an excuse to leave us. Did you believe that? No, Dad doesn't lie to me. Walsh introduced the audio recordings next. The jury listened in silence as Linnea's voice filled the courtroom, describing her plan to destroy Alden and discussing the possibility of putting Declan in foster care if he became too much trouble. When the recording ended, several jurors were staring at Linnea with obvious disgust. Declan, when did your mother leave you alone in the house? 3 weeks before Dad came home. She said she and Kellen were going to Portland for a few days to look at apartments. She left me $100 and said she'd be back soon. But she didn't come back. No, I waited and waited. The money ran out after a week. I ate whatever was in the house, cereal, crackers, some canned soup. I tried calling her, but her phone was disconnected. Why didn't you call someone else for help? Declan's voice got quieter. She told me that if I ever called the police or child services, they'd put me in foster care and I'd never see Dad again. She said foster kids get abused and nobody cares about them. So you stayed alone for 3 weeks? Yes. Were you scared? Yes. During cross-examination, Reeves tried to suggest that Declan was exaggerating or had been coached by his father. But the boy's testimony never wavered, and the audio recordings corroborated every detail. Declan, you love your father very much, don't you? Yes. And you're angry at your mother for leaving you. I'm disappointed in her. Disappointed enough to lie about what happened. I don't lie. Dad taught me that lying makes everything worse. But you recorded private conversations between your mother and Mr. Brody. That seems like something an angry child might do to get back at a parent. Declan looked directly at Reeves. I recorded them because I knew something bad was happening and I didn't know who else to tell. Mom said Dad wasn't coming back and that I should call Kellen Dad now. I knew that wasn't right. So you were spying on your mother? I was protecting myself. The defense case lasted less than 2 days. Reeves called character witnesses who testified that Linnea had been a good teacher and community member. He put a psychologist on the stand who talked about the stress of military marriages and how isolation could lead to poor decision-making. But he didn't call Linnea to testify in her own defense. The defendant chooses not to testify, Reeves announced when court reconvened on Thursday morning. Alden understood why. The recordings had destroyed any credibility she might have had. Putting her on the stand would only give the prosecution more opportunities to expose her lies. Kellen Brody had already pled guilty to his charges in exchange for testifying against Linnea. His testimony painted her as the mastermind behind the insurance fraud and asset liquidation schemes. She knew exactly what she was doing, he told the jury. The protection order, the insurance claim, moving the money, that was all her idea. She said military guys were too dumb to figure it out until it was too late. Closing arguments took place on Friday morning. Walsh was brutal in her summary. The defendant wants you to believe she was a victim, a lonely wife driven to desperation by an absent husband. But victims don't file false police reports with fabricated details. Victims don't abandon their children for 3 weeks with no food or supervision. Victims don't commit insurance fraud or steal their spouse's assets while they're serving their country. She paused in front of the jury box. Linnea Reese is not a victim. She's a predator who targeted her own family for profit. She tried to destroy her husband's reputation, steal his property, and abandon his son. She failed because Declan was brave enough to document her crimes, and Alden was smart enough to prove his innocence. Walsh's voice hardened. The defendant showed no mercy to her husband or her son. You should show no mercy to her. Reeves made one final attempt to humanize his client, arguing that her actions came from desperation rather than malice. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury had clearly made up their minds. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. As the jury reached a verdict, the forewoman stood. We have, Your Honor, on the charge of perjury in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of child endangerment in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of theft in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. The verdicts continued. Guilty on all counts. Linnea sat motionless as her life was officially destroyed. Judge Martinez scheduled sentencing for the following month. Linnea was remanded into custody immediately, her bail revoked. As the courtroom emptied, Alden felt Declan's hand on his shoulder. It's over, his son said. Yeah, it's over. 3 weeks later, they returned for sentencing. Judge Martinez had reviewed the pre-sentence report, victim impact statements, and letters from both sides. Mrs. Reese, your actions represent a profound betrayal of trust on multiple levels. You betrayed your husband, your son, and the legal system itself. The evidence shows that your crimes were premeditated, calculated, and designed to cause maximum harm to innocent people. She sentenced Linnea to 6 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 3 years. The sentence also included permanent loss of parental rights and a no-contact order that would remain in effect indefinitely. Kellen Brody had already been sentenced to 8 years on combined charges from multiple jurisdictions. Apparently, his fraud schemes had extended far beyond his relationship with Linnea. Outside the courthouse, Morgan shook Alden's hand. It's done, she said. She can't hurt you or Declan anymore. Thank you. What's next for you two? Alden looked at Declan, who was staring up at the courthouse with an expression of relief and exhaustion. We rebuild. Simple as that. Months later, on a warm Saturday evening in October, almost exactly a year since Alden had returned home to find his key wouldn't work, father and son were working on Declan's first car in the garage. The 1997 Honda Civic needed more work than it was worth, but it was theirs now, a project that belonged to their new life. Dad, there's something I want to ask you, Declan said, looking up from the engine compartment where he was replacing spark plugs. Alden paused in his work on the transmission fluid. What's that? Do you ever think about her? Wonder how she's doing in prison. It wasn't the first time Declan had asked this question, and Alden knew it wouldn't be the last. His son was still processing everything that had happened, still trying to understand how a parent could abandon their child. No, son. I don't. Not at all. Not even sometimes when you're just sitting around. Never. Alden's voice was matter-of-fact, without anger or bitterness. She made her choices. She chose to hurt us instead of talking to us. She chose to lie instead of telling the truth. She chose money and excitement over family. Those weren't mistakes or accidents, they were deliberate decisions. Declan wiped his greasy hands on a shop rag, considering this. Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different. Different how? If you'd been home more during those years. If she'd gotten counseling for whatever was making her unhappy. If we'd all talked more as a family instead of just existing in the same house. Alden set down his wrench and really looked at his son. At 17 now, Declan had grown several inches and filled out. The hollow, frightened look that had haunted him during those first weeks after the rescue was completely gone. He looked healthy, confident, grounded. Son, some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed by other people being nicer to them. Your mother didn't hurt us because we weren't good enough for her or because I traveled too much for work. She hurt us because that's who she chose to be when it mattered. But what if? No what-ifs. Alden interrupted gently but firmly. She abandoned you for 3 weeks with no food and no way to get help. She tried to have you put in foster care so she could disappear with her boyfriend. She filed false police reports designed to destroy my reputation and steal everything I'd worked for. That's not something you forgive or forget or make excuses for. Declan was quiet for a moment, processing this. I know. I understand that intellectually. But sometimes I still miss having a mom, you know? Even a bad one. You'll always have me. And that's enough. I know it is. But sometimes I see other families, normal families, and I wonder what that would have been like. Alden moved closer to his son, choosing his words carefully. Normal families are built on trust and honesty and people putting each other first. We have that now. It took a while to build it, but we have it. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of tools and engine parts creating a rhythm that felt like home. Outside, neighbors were grilling dinner and kids were riding bikes in the fading daylight. Dad, Declan said eventually. Yeah, I'm glad you came back. I'm glad you fought for us. There was never any doubt about that, son. Never. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in November, exactly 18 months after Linnea's sentencing. Alden recognized the return address, immediately Washington State Correctional Center for Women. Linnea's name was printed in the upper left corner in careful block letters that looked like she practiced them. He carried it to the fireplace without opening it, the envelope feeling heavier than paper should. Behind him, Declan looked up from his calculus homework. What was that? Nothing important. Was it from her? Yes. Alden knelt by the fireplace and struck a match. The flames consumed the letter in seconds, leaving nothing but ash and smoke that disappeared up the chimney. You didn't read it? Declan asked. No point. She had 18 years to talk to me honestly. She chose lies and manipulation instead. I'm done listening to anything she has to say. But what if she was trying to apologize? Alden stirred the ashes with a poker, making sure every trace of the letter was destroyed. Apologies are for people who make mistakes. What she did was deliberate. She planned it for months, executed it systematically, and would have succeeded if you hadn't been brave enough to document her crimes. Sometimes I think about writing to her, telling her how I felt when she left me. That's your choice to make, son. But remember, she doesn't deserve access to your thoughts or feelings. She lost that right when she abandoned you. Declan closed his textbook and looked into the fire where his mother's unread words had become smoke and ash. I won't write to her, he said finally. You're right. She doesn't deserve it. Outside, snow was beginning to fall on the quiet street where they'd rebuilt their lives from the ground up. Inside, father and son worked on homework and talked about college applications and weekend plans and everything except the woman who'd tried to destroy them both. Some wounds could heal. Some bridges could be rebuilt. Some mistakes could be forgiven. But betrayal was permanent. And Alden Reese had a long memory he'd won. Legally, morally, completely. Linnea would spend 4 more years in prison, her reputation destroyed, her parental rights terminated forever, her future permanently limited by her felony convictions. When she was finally released, she'd be a middle-aged ex-convict with no family, no career prospects, and no way to rebuild what she'd destroyed. That it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't mercy. It was justice, and justice was enough. "I don't forgive traitors," Alden said quietly, watching the last of the ashes disappear up the chimney. "And I don't read their lies." The fire crackled peacefully in the rebuilt hearth of their rebuilt home, warming the father and son who'd survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new reasons to be grateful for the family they'd saved. But tonight, they were home, safe, together, and that was everything.